Welcome to today's Masterclass, An Actor's Journey, presented at the 10th edition of BMO IFFSA Toronto 2021, the largest South Asian film festival in North America. This year also coincides with the renowned late filmmaker Satyajit Ray's birth centenary, and we're celebrating Ray and his excellence this year at our festival through film screenings, workshops, and masterclasses. Today, we have a very special guest whose journey has inspired many. An actor who has never shied away from speaking his mind, a producer who doesn't believe in the formula, a film curator with a keen eye for detail and good stories, a painter who's not scared to experiment with colors, and a philanthropist who is committed to bringing a positive change in society. Well, that description barely scratches the surface when it comes to our special guest today, Abhay Deol. Despite coming from the most filmy family of Bollywood, the Deols, Abhay has carved his own niche and established himself as one of the most versatile actors in Indian cinema. A non-conformist of sorts, Abhay's panache of portraying complex characters is matched by very few in the industry. As seen in his films like Dev.D, Ranjana, Manorama 6 Feet Under, Zindagi na Milegi Dobara, Shanghai, and Oi Lucky Lucky Oi, to name just a few. Today, we will be talking to Abhay about his journey as an actor thus far. Without further delay, I would like to welcome Abhay Deol. Abhay, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today, and welcome to IFFSA Toronto.
Thank you for having me and that wonderful introduction.
Okay. So you come from, the famous Deol family, which of course, comes with a very strong legacy of its own. Although you come from a family of actors, you've really always, carved your own path. So what was it that you were looking as an actor from the beginning of your journey?
I knew that I had an individuality that I wanted to keep with Bollywood because it's so formula driven. It's hard to keep your sort of individuality intact because you just have to conform so much. So I knew that I had to somehow carve that identity, as opposed to try and do what everybody else is doing. I was aware of that.
When it comes to choosing complex roles, again, you've established yourself by making those choices. When we look at, Dev.D, Lucky Singh, these are very challenging roles. And of course, very challenging for an actor. Talking about Dev.D, how did that come your way?
So Dev.D was an idea that I had swimming in my head for many years. I wanted to contemporize the book and sort of call out this chauvinistic character who's just romanticized. And I think it's sort of like a thing in Indian culture where we spoil our boys, but we expect our girls to be far more moral and principled. Yeah, whereas the boys get away with murder, so to speak. So I just wanted to empower the women, bring out their strength and bring out his weakness. And I wanted to bring him to this day and age. There was a lot of music in my mind. And so I approached Anurag Kashyap, who I thought would be a good director for this, the right director for it. And he loved it. I used to narrate the story to friends and people that I knew, and I wouldn't tell them it's Devdas. I didn't come up with the title. The title, Dev.D, was Anurag's title. I was just going with Devdas, but I wouldn't tell people what story it is that I was narrating. I would narrate the contemporized version to people, and they would be like, oh, it's an art film. And then I'd say, well, actually, it's been made many times and is a mainstream success. And then when I would tell them it's actually Devdas, it's just I put it to modern day and age, then sort of that look in the eye would show up like, oh, yeah, that's right. And finally, once Anurag got a hold of it and UTV wanted to work with Anurag, it just kind of took off.
And how did you prepare for that role then?
Because it was an idea. It was because it was an idea that had swimming in my head for so long. I knew what it was that I wanted to do. Obviously, there's the director and his take and his version. So I sat with Anurag, and he was also like, I think you know this character. He barely directed me in that film. I would like turn to him at the end of the show, like, is that okay? Yeah, that's perfect. Do you want to direct me? I don't know, you're doing fine. So he barely, I remember once he directed me when I said, okay, I have to do drunk walk. Just show me a drunk walk, and then he showed me his drunk walk. And I was like, you're right. I mean, that's the one instance I remember him telling me anything. Another instance I remember after the shot, he came and he hugged me, and it was a very simple scene. And I said, "Why are you hugging me? It's such a simple scene." And he was like, "Well, that's the toughest ones to do, where there's nothing much happening and yet you make something happen." So it literally just was made like that.
All your characters, the ones I've seen you play, Satyajit in Manorama, which I actually just watched again last week. It's amazing. And, again, Lucky Singh. So they're very, very complex. And, with Dev.D, yes, you have been thinking of the story. What about all the other, I would say like more than average complex characters? How do you really get to prepare for these roles? Or what's your technique, so to say?
So the technique is I don't judge them for being complex or not. Every character is complex. There are those that are closer to who you are, so they're sort of easier to not necessarily play, but understand. And then there are those who are so alien to you that you have to kind of get into that person's headspace or their background and see what they would be like. My method really is not to complicate things. I simplify them as opposed to complicate them. So for example, a lot of prep will go in when there's some superficial changes you need to make. So for example, with Shanghai, he's a Tamil Brahmin based in a Hindi speaking state. And so he would speak Hindi with a Tamilian accent or the accent that he's picked up from the state where he learned Hindi. He was an older character as well. So I had to work on that accent. But then something like Zindagi na Milegi Dobara, where he's sort of privileged, urban, young. I didn't have to think too hard. A lot of my method also is, like I said, unless I have to practice an accent or a physical disability of some sort, the rest of it is really in reading the story, seeing, okay, getting the graph of the character, where he starts off, where he goes, and where does he end up. And that's all related to film, the script, the story. So it's really an understanding of what it is we're making and what is it that we're trying to say. And then from there, it's trying to make it as real and believable as possible. And there's no, for me personally, I can't rehearse being real. I can't rehearse being, someone you can relate to. That's something that comes out inherently. If you enjoy what you do, if you love what you do, it's never work. So one of the important things for me is to have fun with it. I in fact had more to work upon being easily distracted, because when you're action, you have to just throw yourself in there, and I couldn't work with too many distractions. And so over the years I've had to sort of get used to chaos while working, because we have less discipline in India than we do in, like, for example, the US. We are more louder, we're more crowded, we're, as a people. So I had to really start to look at the things that distracted me and say that, what, that's a part of my job.
Right.
And that was something I had to work upon. Marketing, I hated marketing. I hated going out and pushing myself and doing PR. And then I had to really come around to say, okay, that's also part of my job. It was more the surface stuff that I had to work on. The internal stuff, not so much, because, you know the story. You find something that you relate to in the character. So with Dev.D, with Dev, he was really obsessive and indulgent, and I have had those phases in my life where I've been obsessive and indulgent, self-pitying, privileged. I don't know it. With Lucky, it was his ambition. He'd do anything to get what he wants. Now, I'm not somebody ambitious classically, but the fact that I wanted to do non-conformist, non-formula films within Bollywood, that was an ambition. That was pretty ambitious because nobody was really doing it at that time. And so I found that ambition. So I find some common link in a character, and then I go from there. Like I said, I reduce it to the simplest answer,
No, thanks for sharing that. So, with all these very sort of unique projects, and how deliberate were you in selecting these roles? Were you going out of your way to seeking and positioning yourself a certain way?
That happened organically. because I just knew that I couldn't do something that was, I mean, I don't have anything wrong against mainstream. I've done mainstream films as well, but they still need to speak to me. I need to relate to them. So like a Zindagi na Milegi Dobara. It's a really good balance between the mainstream and something new that mainstream hasn't seen before. Socha na tha, you know. So yeah, I just started from there, really.
Has being an actor helped you to live a deeper and a more meaningful life?
Yes, I can't imagine being anything else. I'm thankful that, you know, something I'm passionate about became the thing that became my profession and I could earn a living from it. You go to any actor's workshop, you don't have to be an actor to do an actor's workshop. Do it purely just for the experience, because acting is all about, well, playing the truth, having empathy for the characters you're portraying. So, you know, you could get a character who's shades of gray, you could get a character who's completely white, you can get a character who's completely black. And for each one of them, you have to have an empathy. So if you're playing a negative character, then you got to have empathy for that character and see why he is the way he is. And so I suppose it broadens your compassion, it broadens your empathy, it broadens your understanding of people and the choices they make. You really have to question why are they doing what they're doing. And so I suppose you could say, yes, there's that element of spirituality there, because you're not sitting behind a desk pushing papers, you know, and signing things. You're out there on the field researching or communicating, and then you have to try your best to portray them right. And so you have to be very careful. You have to understand nuance. So yes, being an actor definitely gives you the chance to be. And I'm not saying all actors are compassionate and emphatic and spiritual, but you do have the chance to be.
You've been, quite the pioneer when it comes to so-called offbeat indie or content-driven cinema. And if we look at, with the OTT platforms nowadays, you see that the newcomers who are coming at this age, is it a more favorable ecosystem compared to when you started your journey?
Yes, it's definitely much more democratic. You have now more people in a position of power. So Bollywood, traditionally, it's very cliquish, almost Kabbalistic, you could call it. There's like a handful of groups that control like most of the money that goes through. And each one has their own sort of interpretation of the formula. And so, you conform to that, you do what they say. It restricts your creativity, it takes away your individuality, and also it doesn't allow individual voices, diverse groups of people from diverse backgrounds to come in. I'm not saying that the industry is not open to diversity. In fact, if most industries in India, it's the most diverse. But like I said, since there's just a handful of people dictating what sells and what doesn't, unless you conform, you don't get in. Now with the OTT platforms, yeah, sure, they're going to make mainstream stuff, just like the cinemas need to sell tickets, they need their subscribers, but because it's a digital platform, it has infinite space. And so they can do the Bollywood formula stuff, but they can also do the non-formula stuff, because you got to feed the beast, as they say, and so that has opened it up to new people, new ideas. When I was doing my earlier years, I was working with a lot of debut directors or second-time filmmakers, and so they were still not affected or tainted by the powers that be saying, do it like this, do it like that. There's a conditioning that takes over people, and they don't even realize it. Because in trying to balance their lives, and we all have to, all right, what does my producer want and what do I want? I got to meet him halfway. A lot of the times people lose their individuality. So it's nice to have the OTT platforms who will not cast someone who can't conform to the formula, but they probably have something for him or her that is more apt for them, which is something you wouldn't find in Bollywood, because you just have to look like a certain type of hero, a certain type of heroine, which is why all the heroes and heroines in Bollywood look the same at the end of the day, and all the trailers look the same. So you see the OTT platforms, and suddenly there are older actors and actresses, people who you wouldn't see necessarily on screen. Bollywood formula tends to just have the hero, heroine, and everybody else is like a padding. They use that word too. And they really are. There's not much thought given to the characters that support the main lead, whereas in shows, all your supporting cast is strong because you never know who might come out to be the more interesting character, and you have to have a background in history to them. And so they prepare in that way. So that discipline has come in a lot more now because of the OTT platforms. And Bollywood is trying to catch up now, at least in terms of creativity. But in terms of, formula, they'll still continue on unless their films really start to flop, which is also happening.
Right. Do you consider yourself a Bollywood actor?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I come from a Bollywood family. I never liked the word Bollywood. I liked Hindi cinema, but then in the year 2000, 2001, it got put in the Oxford Dictionary, and I thought, you know what, in a way it makes sense because Hindi cinema copies, at least till a short while back, was always just copying Hollywood, and you know this. They, so often they would just lift up scenes and stories, and it would always look like a B-grade version of a Hollywood film. So I was like, okay, maybe Bollywood works because they've been copying, and yeah, so I don't like the term, but I use it because I think it's apt. Also, it's when you say Bollywood is a genre. So as soon as you say Bollywood, you get visuals of beautiful men, beautiful women, a lot of colors, song and dance and drama and romance and action. So I grew to accept the name, if what cynically, but still, now I say it all the time. So I am a Bollywood actor by virtue of the fact that I work in Hindi film, and Hindi film is called Bollywood. But I'm not one of those Bollywood actors who played the game, so to speak, and tried to sort of have an alternative to the formula. And if Hindi cinema is called Bollywood, then even the alternative films would be Bollywood films, I suppose. I don't know. Bollywood is only cinema from Bombay, that's why Bollywood. But when you say South Asian cinema, well, then it's Pakistan, it's India, it's Sri Lanka, it's Nepal, it's all of these countries. If you say Indian cinema, then you include the whole of the country, There's Tollywood in there as well.
Yeah.
So Bollywood is more specific to Bombay than Hindi cinema.
So, Abhay, you've been spending a lot of time in North America as well, LA.
I was in Toronto for 2 months last.
So are you working on projects out in the West? Is there a shift?
Well, I just shot a film for Disney. Well, it's a kid's film. I play the father, and that's coming out on Disney US on the 13th of August. That's the only one I've worked on so far. And I'm developing some productions out of LA as well. Yeah.
Going back to Abhay Deol as an actor. So today, what are you looking for when you're selecting projects that are coming your way?
I pretty much, right? I from the beginning looked for stuff that I can relate to. That's believable. That's real. That the people I portray are real. Like for me, a hero isn't somebody who has big muscles, beats up 10 guys and gets the girl. A hero is somebody who may not have the strength to fight back, but still chooses to do so. So that's just an example of the kind of characters I'm attracted to. And that was from day one. So that hasn't changed. Obviously, I would like to push the bar, raise the bar a bit more. I feel like I'm restricted in the environment that I am in because, India is a conservative country. There's only so far you can go in terms of freedom of your voice. You have to respect people's sentiments. And so you got to work within that restrictive space. It's not like the US. So within that space, what can I do? What can I say? Because there's no point in stirring up trouble. I've done that within the industry enough. So the only people I really stick it to is the industry because I can.
It seems like there's always been that rebel in you, and you're one of the first few to call things out when you see them. So how have you grown over the years? Have you become more diplomatic, or have you just gathered more, support from the fraternity?
Well, a lot of my stuff was about the fraternity. I felt that I'm an actor, I'm not an activist. So I should focus on my activism, if you can call that, within the industry, because that's where I have power. That's where I can make change. You also risk picking up a story, and because you're a celebrity, suddenly it's not about the story, about the issue anymore. You become the story instead, and that doesn't help. So yes, I've learned the hard way that diplomacy helps only because sometimes when you really make a noise, you become more vulnerable and they make it about you, and then the issue is lost. So what's the point? And I'm not here to publicize myself. And so over the years, after experiencing rather, because words don't teach. So after having direct experience, yes, I've learned that now I'm older and I've stated, my position right, correct. People know where I stand. And so I try and do it diplomatically because my desire is to come to a resolution. My desire isn't to just make a noise. So, for example, when I took up the endorsement of fairness creams within the Bollywood film industry, and they all do it, whether Charuk or Ritik or Vidya Balan or Deepika Padukone or Priyanka Chopra in the past. I mean, these are all the names. And it was so I just mocked them on Facebook. It didn't make me any friends. I didn't build any bridges, but at least it became a thing nationally. And these companies like L'Oreal and terrible brand names. There are a lot of the international brands, Nivea and all of these guys. They won't be racist in white countries. They'll be racist in brown countries, because in the white countries they know they're not going to be tolerated. The Western countries at least have come to the point where they've seen what racism does. Whereas in these Asian countries where we still sort of in this racist existence of thinking fairer is better, they feel they can do it because the public accepts it. So who are they to make a change? They just want to make a buck. So it's not just the Bollywood celebrities, but even the brands themselves who should share that responsibility. And then many years go by after I did that. And then the George Floyd murder happened. And then the issue of racism came up, fairness schemes came up again. So like that, I've seen that one issue that I picked up grow. I mean, I did take up musicians' rights and spoke up publicly against the exploitation of musicians, against by big studios, by music companies. And that didn't go anywhere because, again, I realized that the musicians who were standing by me eventually signed the same clause that they wanted me to fight for. They were only using me because I was a smaller producer compared to the other producers who would just tell them, look, just why don't you let it be? And they would let it be. So I realized you can become a pawn in this larger game. So be smart with what you do. And is it worth it? At the end of the day, if my own countrymen are buying those fairness creams, they develop an inferiority complex for the color of their skin. So it's the joke's on them. But so I don't feel like fighting for them, but I do want to stand by the principle because it's larger than the people of my country. So these are the thoughts that have come my way. And so you could say, yes, I'm a little older now and a bit more diplomatic, and I'm not going to be that crusader because at the end of the day, I'm a filmmaker. And what I should do, and I've done from the beginning, is let my issues speak to the films I do. They should be the ones that speak. So that's why empowering the women in the Dev.D story that I came up with was really important, because we've always just put them up as glam dolls. Never, very rarely do women get meaty roles. And this is kind of true of Hollywood as well. But in Bollywood, it's a much bigger level than in Hollywood even. So you just got to do your work within the space that you are employed and you have power. And the rest, where your power doesn't rest, where you don't have power, no point in going there. And also expect your own culture to pick it up. You can't be the lone man picking these issues up, because then you just look like the only one screaming. And is it for attention? Because nobody else seems to be caring about it, So you got to have a bit of self-preservation, but at the same time, not so much that you only think about yourself. It's about balance.
What about the audience? You feel the audience has a more cultivated taste now compared to, 10 or 15 years ago?
Yeah, in these last 10, 15 years, due to technology, and this is not just in film, but humankind, never before in our history has technology evolved so fast and spread so wide. And so people now have grown up watching content from all over the world. So they're a lot more spoiled for choice. Their tastes are refined. They have a better idea of themselves in this world. And now the 20, 25-year-olds in India today have a lot more pride in who they are and where they come from than the 25-year-old 25 years ago. Because 25, 30 years ago, if they weren't exposed to foreign culture as much or foreign product, content as much. They wouldn't know what to compare us to. Now they can. And then they say, well, why aren't we taking those risks? Why aren't we talking about those issues? Why aren't we acting in that way or directing in that way or getting that quality? And we're good enough. So that sense of pride is being infused in them a lot more than before. The identity is stronger. And so the audience is in that sense for sure more evolved. But my attitude towards the audience has always been that they're smarter than I am. In Bollywood, especially in the days when I entered, and you'd hear actors say this all the time when they're promoting a movie, oh, just leave your brains behind at home and watch this. And oftentimes I'd be like, who are you showing this film to, brainless people? What kind of a film have you made? And just show me what you think about your own movie. A lot of times filmmakers would tell me, oh, you don't make, we told this all the time at the beginning of my career, you don't make films for yourself, you make films for the audience. And I'm like, no, I make it for myself. Why would I expect you to like it if I don't? I don't look down upon you. I'm not going to condescend. I believe that you're smarter, and so I have to be that much better. So my bar is this high, because I'm catering to an evolved audience. Even if you claim it's not there, I think it is. And that reflects upon my work. But if I thought that the audience was not smart, then I would make brainless films because I believe the audience is brainless. I just think that the audience will take what you give them. I've never had this belief that, oh, they don't want to see anything outside of the formula. I've always believed that they did, but as Noam Chomsky wrote the book, Manufacturing Consent, there's a lot of manufactured consent. Films create culture. So we've created that culture. And so then now you say that the audience doesn't want it. It's a chicken and egg, so to speak. Give them a variety, and I'm sure they'll embrace it. But if you're not giving them a variety, they don't know. And that's why OTT platforms, technology, and online streaming has now given them that. And so the taste buds have evolved from foreign stuff, not local.
There's again other interests and projects, of course, on the production side, you're involved. Anything else that we can expect from Abhay Deol in the next short term or the long term?
Well, in the short term, there's of course the Disney movie coming out in the US on the 13th. That's for Disney.
13th of August.
13th of August. Yes. I'm shooting a limited series for Netflix, and I'm really, really excited about that one. That should come out sometime, I think March maybe of next year, but I mean, don't quote me on that. I know that Netflix have announced the project, but they haven't put out a date yet. And with this COVID, there's delays happening. So, but there's that Netflix show that I'm doing, which I absolutely, absolutely adore and love. I think it's probably one of the best scripts I've read. So that, and then, yeah, and my own productions are in prep right now, so I can't really speak about them.
What advice would you like to give to an upcoming actor today who would be in your position, given the landscape has changed a little bit, and also a message for the audience?
What would I say to actors? You've got to do what you've got to do. You've got to, of course, work on your skills. I think everybody can act, but not everybody can be an actor. And by that, I mean, if you can be yourself in front of the camera and totally comfortable, be yourself. And, that's why I said everybody can be an actor. Well, everybody can act, but not everybody can be an actor, sorry. So if you can be yourself, that's also some form of acting because the camera's on you. But to be an actor, you have to go further than just being yourself. Mm-hmm. And that takes time and skill and dedication. You have to remember one thing. Talent can definitely push you and take you somewhere forward, but talent alone is not going to get you success. So if you find yourself frustrated because you're talented, but you're not getting anywhere, to realize that in this world, talent alone doesn't get you forward. And so not to be so hard on yourself. It would be tragic if you have acting talent and you're not getting the opportunity and you might have to choose something else. But if you can excel as an actor, and situation is not allowing you, giving you the opportunity, don't be so hard on yourself. And you can direct your passions elsewhere. Perhaps your passion needs to be used elsewhere. I feel a lot of actors lose hope and then they feel like they're failures. And this is true for most people, particularly in the art field, because it's so, um, it's not a regular job. There's no guarantees. It's not a 9 to 5. There's no assurances. So it's a not dangerous. It's a insecure place to inhabit. And so be aware of that, because sometimes that can get to you. Might think it's your failure, when actually it's not. It's the system. I mean, it's hard for me to say this, but if you don't have to come in there to change the system. You can come in and be a part of it, and that's fine as well, as long as you give it your honest 100% best. And I honestly, look, this is something I can say to your audience as well, whether they're actors or not. That you've got to embrace life and give it your best shot, and hopefully have fun while doing it. You may be privileged, and so life is easier. You may have no privilege, and so life is tougher. Whatever your situation is, you ultimately have to find a space where you're satisfied, or where you're secure. And aim for security, aim for happiness, aim for fun. And you can find that, you'll be surprised. You can find that anywhere. It just depends on how hard you are being on yourself. This is the thing I want. Until I get this thing, I'm not going to rest. And it's a bit of it's hard to explain that, because yeah, you have to have passion, and that's what passion is. And so to have passion, you have to be like that. But at the same time, you can't let that take over you. Does not mean you're not passionate. Does that make any sense?
Yes, that's very profound, in fact. Thank you. Thank you so much, Abhay, for sharing your time with us today and joining us to share insights from your journey. And we wish you all the best.
Thank you. Take care. Good luck with everything.